Okay. So I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather today, covering the many nations across Australia. And I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. May we walk together with respect, learning from the knowledge and wisdom that has been shared for tens of thousands of years. Hello, and welcome to the webinar on social license for renewables, a myth or manageable. My name is Matthew Gordon, and I'm a recovering public servant and currently a client executive at community engagement consultancy Capire. And I'm joined by my lovely colleague, Jen McDonnell. Jen, hello, and what are you
Hello.
recovering from?
Oh, hello. How are you, Matt? And hello, everyone on the line. I've seen names pop up and people saying good day and say hello. What am I recovering from? Nothing really. I didn't have to get up in the middle of the night to do this, Matt, like you. So I'm all good. It's a healthy time of the day for me to kick off. But yeah, I'm on Ghana land. I'm up in the Adelaide Hills.
Well, lovely to be joining you from around the world. So today we're having a conversation about this idea of social license and in particular how might communities across the board, but particularly those living in the crosshairs of new renewable energy infrastructure and renewable energy generation developments, how these communities might accept or be prepared to negotiate the burdens and impacts of this enormous energy transition. Or perhaps community acceptance or a social license in this space is simply a decoration, a folly of an idea, unlikely to be real or have any practical purpose in change. And of course, the things we might talk about today also relate to a whole range of developments, either adjacent or completely unrelated to energy. Actually, I note in our audience today, we have people who are working directly on renewable energy developments. Lovely to have you here. We have people who need to consider the policy and strategic implications of how to bring a variety of communities along on the journey. I was looking at the list of registrations earlier. We've got sustainability experts from across government and local government and regional authorities. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. We've got communication and community engagement leaders from around the place as well, also thinking deeply about these questions and issues of social license. And we have a range of consultants and experts supporting all sorts of organisations in this space. So, Jen, while you and I are in conversation, how do you feel about everyone in this webinar being part of the conversation?
I feel good about that. I think there's enormous wealth of expertise in the room, and I'd love people to share. I don't hold all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't want people to think that. I guess our conversation today is just to bounce around some ideas and some experiences that I've had along my career, working a fair bit in the renewable space, but also disaster recovery and general engagement areas. So yeah, very, very happy for
Okay.
people to be involved as much as possible because everyone's got a wealth of knowledge to share.
Well, let's do that. So let's keep this this webinar as interactive as possible. So we do have the chat function turned on for everyone. So please, our audience, feel free to ask questions or make comments or question our answers along the way. And let's keep this conversation with all of us. The webinar is also being recorded and we will publish it over the next little while as well. So if you have to duck out early or you'd like to share or extend this conversation to others in your orbit, you will be able to do so. But if I may, Jen, let's shape up this conversation. What is social license? How do we know it exists? What are the telltale signs of having it or not? Is achieving social license for the energy transition in Australia even possible or still possible? And if so, what kind of shift in approach would need to be taken? I mean, every day I'm reading stuff in the news about, this town or that community, opposing a renewable project, or in some cases, towns and communities embracing renewable projects. And often those two places can be so close together. And
Yeah.
so it's probably safe to say social license is quite dynamic, really. It's being won and
Yeah.
lost all over the place. What are
I
your
think
views on this?
I think it's a bit of a funny term, as we know. I think it sort of came from the mining world originally, and there's been a whole load of research done, and there's loads and loads of papers and things and journals and CSIRO work. I guess my lived experience of social license and defining it, I think that companies are generally moving more towards social performance and thinking about social considerations all the way through from planning, design, delivery, and decommissioning, etc., and closure. And I think that's an important shift. But to me, social license is almost like any relationship. It sounds crazy, but I kind of think of it like an orb of light that I'm kind of holding, and it's fragile, and it can shine bright or it can be quite dim at times. And I see working with community a little bit like that, and on projects. And sometimes things are going well, and other times you can feel the social license and the sort of tolerance or somewhat acceptance or support for the project slipping, depending on what's going on in the community and how we're connecting and relating to the community. So I think it is about an ongoing process that's about forming good relationships and building that over time. And I don't think it's everyone in the community will have to accept a project to get social license, but there's a sense within the community, say for rural communities, you can certainly, I think you can tell when you're getting it and when it's slipping and when you're really in trouble. As a couple of examples that I can think of over my career were actually both on King Island, and it's quite a long time ago, with another company that I was working with at the time. I was working on the King Island renewable energy integration project, which was an on-island power station, off-grid hybrid station that was using wind and biodiesel and diesel, and trying to stay as renewable as possible at any time. We needed to introduce smart meters into people's homes, and we really did talk to the community about early design, how we would communicate best with the community. I ended up having a really effective CRG that worked really well together. It wasn't a highly controversial project, sure, but we were trying to put smart meters into people's homes in a little rural, tiny country town. And in Victoria, they'd just done that. And there was a lot of privacy issues and distrust. So we had a local person that helped door knock. We used conversation toolkits so that community groups and organisations could have the conversation around the power station and how these smart meters would work. And the community got behind it, and there was sort of a sponsorship component as well, that if you got a smart meter, you'd be able to give a bit of sponsorship money to any not-for-profit group. So we ended up with 23 groups all getting a little bit of money and having a night together. And so that got its social license to the point where we had not enough of these smart meters to fit into everybody's home. So you knew that that was going well. At the same time, the King Island big, many years ago, on-land wind farm was being introduced to this same community. It was a little bit confusing for them, to be honest. I wasn't actually directly involved with implementing that, and that was really early engagement, by all rights, good practice. There's a lot to read about that. There's a researcher, Rebecca Colvin, that speaks about it if you want to look into it. But they didn't get their social license. That project just didn't get off the ground. So you know when you're getting it and when you're not, when you definitely haven't got it. And I do just think it's about working hard at it, and always keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening in your community and responding to things that they need.
Well, that's the thing that strikes me, is it's not something, it's something that you kind of earn over time, and you need to kind of nurture and kindle the whole time through. And and it strikes me that it only takes a couple of moments or a short amount of time to kind of lose it. The light goes
that's
out
right.
all
The
of a sudden.
trust can be lost through
Yeah.
something that happens. So you just can't be sure, but you need to work at it.
So did some maths earlier, Jen, and I hope this is okay with you,
Mhm.
but between you and I, we have roughly about 35 years of experience working
Great.
in
Thanks.
sustainability and
So glad that
renewables
you
and
added that
engagement.
up.
Yeah, I think it's at least 35. It might be more. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
let's not dwell on that.
okay. So for this next part of the conversation, and I'd love actually our audience to join in on this as well. I'm gonna list, if I may, what I think might be the main kind of the four big factors that determine whether a community will be on board or not with a project, whatever it might be. Let's in this case we're talking about renewables, but it could be extending to things like smart meters or road and rail infrastructure. Who knows?
Mm.
Um, and I'm interested to hear your reflections on, based on the work you've done about, how these sort of, do these sort of factors kind of resonate? Um, and I know you may not want to mention any other, any project specifics, but I'm kind of keen to hear what you've heard and seen and felt on the ground as it may or may not relate to these factors. Yeah. And audience, please jump on chat. Let us know what you think of these factors as well. Okay. So it's a little bit of a kind of a game here. Factor one, um, projects where communities feel like, developers are imposing upon them rather than forging a genuine partnership. It's sort of this sort of kind of notion of like, being coerced into having this thing that we didn't sort of ask for. So, engagement is being done to you rather than with you, if that makes sense, or very little engagement at all, of course. So, what do you think about this factor of coercion?
Me, just to
Yeah,
kick off. Yeah.
yeah,
Look, I don't think anyone likes to be have things done to them. If someone wants to, upgrade my kitchen, I want input into that. We all and if someone's going to change my landscape, I'd like to be consulted on it if it's really important to me. I think it's a really challenging and difficult thing for developers because they'll identify certain features about a particular location, whether it's connection to the grid or the wind speed or the to make it an appropriate viable project, and then they bring it to the community. I sometimes think that we could do more work around sharing those decisions around how we've ended up coming to your place rather than just going, I mean, obviously when there's reses and things like that, it's different, but I think education's really important to build a partnership, a more collaborative relationship with communities. I think personally that where you can, giving them experiences
mm,
where where there can be some lived experience of maybe it's an example I've got of a woman that didn't know if she wanted to host a wind turbine. We organised for her to go and visit someone local who had one. We
right.
didn't stay with her. She knew the family and she went up and had conversations on her own. So finding opportunities where you can really, you're not coercing them as such, but you're
Mm,
providing opportunities to help them make their own decisions about certain things.
okay.
Anyone else got any ideas?
Yeah. Anything on the chat there? I haven't seen anything come through. Please jump on anytime with comments or questions. All right, let's go. Let's move on to the next factor.
Mm,
Factor two, um, unfair distribution of benefits and burdens. So,
yeah.
rural, regional communities are bearing the kind of the brunt, in terms of the landscape and changes to infrastructure around them, while the urban areas are actually enjoying all the benefits of, clean, secure, and reliable energy.
Energy. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I suppose,
It's a
yeah,
Oh, it's a huge challenge, I think, for
yeah,
any of us who are working in renewables because they're invariably in rural environments. Sometimes they don't have good, reliable power themselves, and they're, they're hosting these things that are helping, like you say, the city. And what's fair and unfair is that's people's perceptions, and that's really difficult to manage. Like Dr. Peter Sandman, who's a risk specialist, talks to us about how when people feel like they're not heard, or they're not being told the truth, or they're being treated unfairly, then they're going to have a higher resistance to things. And so they're areas I think that we have to really work on. And I guess that goes back to, for me, to the education piece of really taking people through all the reasons that you've landed where you have, and then treating them with respect at all times, always being responsive, following through on what you say you're going to do. Over the years, I've had people that are really anti a project, but if we treat them with respect, they'll always keep the conversation lines open, and there's always opportunity to learn and understand what their concerns are. So, but yeah, we have I think the whole community benefits, I'm not, shared benefits is a bit of a term, but I think we really do have a lot of work to do in that space, and that it has the opportunity to help if we can work really hard, maybe through enhancing leadership within regions themselves, so that you're really helping empower trusted voices in the community, and building things with long-term benefits for these communities that have to host these things. It's bringing a new industry to their backyard, and I just think we have to work really, really hard to get the community to help us identify how we can really bring benefits.
I think it's challenging as well, on the benefits conversation. Landholders are often kind of get the compensation, and that kind of creates these divisions within community, and I think that can be a sort of a huge challenge. And it's about, I suppose, developers identifying how they can provide those broader community benefits. So it's a win for everyone, not just for the lucky landholder that gets paid.
Yeah. And things have improved immeasurably over the years in that space. I just think we've got a lot more work to do. And it's very complex at the moment, say in the Gippsland region. I know there's a couple of people there, with Vic Grid and all the multiple offshore wind farms, for example. The community, I think, do feel quite burdened by all of that. And my experience so far with the communities down there is I think they might be a bit overwhelmed and almost confused about some aspects of who's doing what, and what's the actual process of the contract for difference, and a lot of the detail. And I think the community is wise, and we need to remember that, and keeping them engaged and informed is important.
Interesting. Couple of comments coming through. I wanted to pick up on Sally Lloyd's comment about one of the challenges, you can't really sort of engage community until we sign off on landholders, and there's this sort of chicken egg thing.
It is tricky.
Is that timing, and when do you go out to a broader community before you've made some key decisions? What are your sort of thoughts on that? Do you sort of bite the bullet and kind of go early and declare what we're trying to do before we've confirmed or signed anyone else up to a project?
I think in regards to Sally's comment, you have to know that you've got a viable project and so, and you probably do have to have license and option agreements and things like that in place. But I guess one of the things that we did once on Flinders Island, it was only for a few turbines, but there were a lot of people really upset about it and gone to the media and ABCs. We did actually run like a session where we, had environmental planners and bird people and all sorts, and had maps out, and really stepped through a lot of the decision making around how things got there. So I went down into a little bit more detail maybe than sometimes we do with communities. We often, have our boards up and we kind of talk to them, but this was sort of small workshop groups that really helped people understand the decision-making processes, and challenged us at times too, but that's okay.
All right, I'm going to move on. Factor 3, and I think this sort of picks up on, the Bronte's point about it. Sort of notions of sort of honesty and declining kind of trust in
Mm.
institutions,
Oh
and
gosh.
in the industry and politics as well. I mean, I just point out we're on the doorstep of a federal election, so we're getting all sorts of mixed messages from government and industry and changing policy
Hmm.
settings and years of climate wars and broken
Totally.
promises and institutional
Yeah.
failures. What's your take here?
I
You
mean,
see
I
that
think
playing out?
we've had declines in institutional trust for a very long time. I think we've totally peaking at the moment with the whole kind of Trumpian world that we're
Right.
living in. I think we're all literally walking around, a lot of us with our jaws on the ground, unbelievably. I was listening to a amazing person who was my mentor many years ago. I really respect her. It's Stephanie Roy Callum. I don't know, people would know her. Um, and she was just speaking the other day about we're living in times of just really increased chaos, the Trumpianism. There's misinformation, disinformation, it's disruptive, it's chaotic, it's eroding trust, it's causing division. And we're even literally, as she was saying, we're living in alternate realities, apparently, like, just blatant lies that we kind of know in our heart aren't right, but how do we respond? It's quite fascinating. It's exhausting, I think, for people and for communities. She was just saying, and I really agree, that more than ever we have to build relationships and connections first with people and
Mhm.
then dig into the issues. And we've always needed to do that. We almost need to do even more of that, and try not to be too biased in our own thinking, because we're all getting siloed by everything that we're being fed all the time. So that curiosity, which we do in engagement all the time, to me, that's the basis of engagement and building rapport with people, is genuinely being curious about what's making them tick, what is underneath the banner and the
Mm.
fear and whatever they're saying that they're worried about. It's that. And I think the other thing which I took away or reflected on is that maybe there are times when we need to have that rapport in place, but then gently challenge some of the things. Like recently, I was down in the Gippsland, and we won't get into this too much, but I was being told that nuclear was the answer, that these and that was going to have less impact, and so there's a lot of misinformation. I think at times we need to gently kind of challenge a little. You don't want to enrage people. You don't want to take people to outrage, because they can't hear, their brains don't function, and you can't communicate with them. But there might be moments in time now with all this misinformation and lack of trust to challenge certain things that you kind of know are just not quite right. But it's got to be
Mm.
done carefully.
And it's in order to engage, you need to have the relationship
You've
as
got
your
to have the
basis.
relationship. So it's patience. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's patience and time. And
Mm.
it's something we just don't have when
Mm.
we're working. And we don't have enough time working with communities.
So when we sort of say engage early on a project, really what we're saying is go form some relationships with the community,
Mm,
get to know who people are,
yeah.
understand where they're coming from, understand the things that make them tick, understand their beliefs, identify maybe common common areas, where you have shared values, and try and
Mm,
forge those relationships such that you can kind of engage people in open, honest, challenging, truthful kind of ways, and
yeah.
respectful ways that can give you a foundation for building an acceptance in an idea. I'm going to move to the next factor,
Hmm.
last one, and I think this picks up on a couple of the comments people are making. Rachel, Jennifer, you mentioned sort of often we're not just dealing with one project. These communities are dealing with multiple projects.
Mm,
It's a
hmm.
cumulative impact, and
Yeah,
it's exhausting, right? Where you've
it
got
is. It's a
the
lot.
next kind of mob coming and going. Well, what do you guys want to now do to our place?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think this relates. The factor four is sort of the concerns about environmental and to an extent kind of cultural concerns. So we've just got so much happening in some of these communities that surely the cumulative impact on biodiversity is there. Surely there's going to be inconsistency in approaches to working in with First Nations cultural values, um, and failures to just kind of recognise or respect even sort of European settler cultural values as well. Like these are multiple projects scarring our community, Jen, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, it's huge, and it's been playing a lot on my mind because I've been working in the Gippsland region, and I noticed lots of people are talking about, these multiple projects and how can we collaborate more. It's really tricky because it's set up in a fairly competitive environment. I know in the Gippsland there's developer events that are happening, and key gatherings of meetings of the teams, all the developers, so they can communicate and collaborate. But there's still a competitive component, which makes it tricky, and I'm not sure what the answer is to that one. But we are seeing more of collaboration, I think, and I think we need to continue to try to do that between government and regional groups, and try and take a regional approach to where we can, to benefit sharing where it's possible and things like that. And I agree, that comes back again what you're saying about multiple impacts on vegetation, or on environmental impacts. Not all they can't all be talking to each other. Yeah, someone's just put local government has a role. I think it's true. I agree with Karen there. I think that was the developer sessions are a good initiative, but I think they are a bit overwhelming for the community and a little bit scary almost to come into. But there's not easy options to where to hold them, because there's halls and things like that where we're setting them up. Yeah, and I think with cultural knowledge, again, Indigenous people just have unique knowledge of the natural world, and possess all this knowledge about the ecosystems and sustainable practices, and we've just got to keep trying to engage them really early and provide the time to get their input and thoughts, and work out how they can also benefit from any of these projects through agreements and partnerships.
Certainly, it's a small needle to thread, I think, overall,
Yeah.
the challenge of social license there. And my last question for you, Jen, before we wrap, is it still possible? Can we
I don't
achieve community acceptance in this transition? Like, or is it
I
all lost?
No, I don't think it's all lost at all. I think it's imperative that we keep working. I think all the people that I tend to talk to and work with in this space have the best intentions in the world. I think we always have to remember that no one can read our minds or know what our intentions are. All they see are our behaviours and how it impacts them. So we need to always be working towards ensuring that we are trying to put our best foot forward, and be honest and truthful and follow through, and remember that they're only seeing our behaviours of how we act. So yeah, we've got a tough gig, everyone on this call, as we all know, but it's a very interesting space, and I just think we need to remember that we're humans, and it comes down to connection and respect, and really listening, and then collaborating as much as we can to get a good outcome. That's sort of how I feel, but it's a lot. And it's all happening very fast now. We've probably had a long time to do this, but we're squeezing it in.
Yeah, getting it done. Well, never late, never. Well, best to be late than never, I suppose.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh,
I feel like
it's
we've just really
lovely.
scratched the surface. I
We
think
have.
maybe we could probably do
Thanks to
more.
everybody here. Yeah, have another one. Oh yeah, we didn't get a chance to answer lots of questions, but yeah, lovely.
And thanks to our audience for your participation. Your comments and questions have been great. If I could ask actually one final comment about how you found today's webinar, that would be great. Some feedback would be awesome. And are there any other topics that you would like covered in these sorts of conversations? Drop them in the chat. But again, Jen, thanks for sharing your insights and your
Thanks.
many, many years of experience and expertise at the table.
Let's
Capire
not
is,
ever add that up again. No.
Capire is very lucky to have you. And
Happy to be here.
in closing, I believe engaging communities on this topic really is of the renewable transition is one of the most consequential assignments a community engagement practitioner can have. And the lessons and ideas that we've shared today are essential to that assignment. So thank you once again, and goodbye, everyone. Have an awesome week.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye. Thanks, Matt.